Have you ever noticed how manipulators don't start by controlling your actions? They start by reshaping your thoughts. They don't shout, they whisper. They don't demand, they suggest. And somewhere between, you're just being sensitive and after everything I've done for you, you stop trusting your own instincts, not because you're weak, but because they've trained you to second-guess your clarity. It's like peeling a banana and tossing away the skin, forgetting that the same skin can make you slip if you're not careful. Or think of a donkey tied near a pile of cow dung. He doesn't notice the stench anymore because he's lived in it so long. That's what subtle manipulation feels like. It becomes so familiar, so normalized, that you stop noticing the mess you're sinking in until you're too deep to escape without getting dirty. Because while they're busy gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and reshaping your reality, you have a choice: keep explaining or reclaim your clarity. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself is the moment their grip begins to weaken. And when you name the phrase for what it is, not a joke, not concern, but control, you take back something they hoped you wouldn't: your awareness. So how do you spot the phrases that sound caring but cut deep, the ones that erode confidence without leaving bruises? Stay with me, because the last one will shift everything you thought you knew. Let's get started. Number 1. You're overreacting. Let's talk about one of the most gaslighting, dismissive phrases manipulators love to use: you're overreacting. At first glance, it might sound like a gentle correction, maybe even concern. But dig deeper, and you'll see the real game behind it. This phrase isn't calming, it's controlling. It's not used to de-escalate a situation, it's used to shut it down, to make you question your feelings, second-guess your instincts, and silence yourself, without them having to raise their voice once. Here's what's really happening. When someone says you're overreacting, what they're actually saying is, your emotional response makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to label it as irrational. They're not interested in why you're upset. They don't want to understand your side. They just want to end the conversation in a way that makes them look composed while making you look unstable. And if you've ever experienced this, you know exactly how it feels. You start to wonder, maybe I am being dramatic. Maybe I should just let it go. That hesitation, that self-doubt, that's exactly what they wanted. Here's the truth. You're allowed to feel what you feel. Anger, frustration, hurt. Those are valid reactions, especially when someone crosses a line. Manipulators know this, which is why they don't try to address the emotion. They try to erase it. They weaponize calmness, using it as a mask for control. They say you're overreacting, not because you are, but because your reaction exposes their behavior. And that's the last thing they want. This is where Stoic wisdom cuts through the fog. Epictetus said, "He who controls your emotions controls your perception." That's what this phrase is trying to do. It's not about helping you reflect. It's about shifting your reality. If they can get you to believe your reaction is irrational, they don't have to take responsibility for what caused it. The blame shifts from their actions to your emotions. And in that moment, control changes hands. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Jessica, was in a relationship where her partner constantly used this phrase. Anytime she brought up something that made her uncomfortable, he'd say, "You're overreacting," or "You're always so sensitive." Over time, Jessica stopped voicing her concerns. She began to mistrust her own feelings. It wasn't until she confided in a friend who validated her perspective that she realized what was happening. Her partner wasn't helping her manage emotions. He was manipulating her out of them. So how do you deal with this? First, pause. But don't retreat. Just because someone labels your reaction doesn't mean they're right. Second, check the pattern. If they only call you overreactive when you're holding them accountable, that's not feedback. It's a tactic. And finally, stand your ground. Emotional clarity is your power. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. Because at the end of the day, someone who truly respects you won't silence your emotions. They'll want to understand them. And someone who repeatedly tells you you're overreacting, they're not afraid of your emotion. They're afraid of what it reveals about them. Number 2, you're too sensitive. Let's talk about one of the most common and most damaging phrases manipulators use. You're too sensitive. It sounds like harmless feedback, a casual remark, but it's not. It's a dismissal, a form of gaslighting dressed up as advice. What they're really doing is labeling your pain as a flaw, your awareness as a weakness. And once they convince you that feeling deeply is something to be ashamed of, they've already started rewriting your reality. Here's how it works. You bring up something that hurt you. Maybe it was a rude comment, a passive-aggressive joke, or a broken promise. You're not yelling, you're not overreacting, you're simply being honest. But instead of listening, they deflect. Wow, you're so sensitive. Just like that, the focus shifts. Suddenly, it's not about what they did, it's about how you feel. And now you're the problem. This tactic is subtle but powerful, because once you start questioning your own emotional responses, you become easier to control. You second-guess yourself. You apologize when you were the one hurt, and eventually you learn to stay quiet, to avoid being labeled too much. But here's the truth. Sensitivity is not the enemy. Sensitivity means you notice things others ignore. It means your soul is awake. It means your emotional radar is working. And those who mock your sensitivity aren't stronger than you. They're just more skilled at hiding. That's where Stoic strength comes in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Feel deeply, but remain unmoved by provocation." In other words, feel everything. Just don't let someone else's chaos pull you away from your center. Your emotions aren't your weakness. Mismanaging them is, but noticing them, that's your wisdom speaking. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call her Rachel. Rachel was in a relationship where every time she voiced her discomfort, her boyfriend would say, "You're just too sensitive. I was joking." It didn't matter if the jokes left her crying. It didn't matter if the sarcasm turned her insides cold. He made her believe that her pain was the punchline, and for a while, she bought it. She started holding it in, suppressing every instinct, until she barely recognized herself. It wasn't until a friend said, "What if your sensitivity is the most honest part of you?" that Rachel snapped out of it. She realized that she had been taught to doubt what her body and heart were clearly feeling, that the shame wasn't hers, it was handed to her. So here's what to do when someone calls you too sensitive. First, pause. Instead of defending yourself, ask, "Why is my reaction making you uncomfortable?" Second, trust the signal. Sensitivity is not fragility. It's feedback. And third, remember this. Strong people don't mock emotions, they respect them. Because the ones who want you numb are the ones who benefit from your silence. But when you own your feelings without shame, you become the one thing they can't manipulate, aware, grounded, and free. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 3. I was just joking. Relax. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive phrases manipulators use to disguise their true intent. I was just joking. Relax. At first, it seems harmless, a casual deflection. But beneath that thin layer of humor lies something calculated. This isn't about comedy, it's about control. When someone says something hurtful and hides it behind a joke, they're not trying to make you laugh. They're testing you. They want to know how much disrespect you'll tolerate while still keeping them around. It's not humor, it's a probe. Here's how it works. They say something sharp. Maybe it's about your appearance, your intelligence, your values, something that clearly hits below the belt. When you react, when you call it out, they smile and say, "Relax, "I was just joking." And in that moment, everything flips. Suddenly, your pain becomes the punchline, and you're the one who's too sensitive. They've turned your reaction into the problem, not their words. That's not a joke. That's emotional manipulation dressed in sarcasm. Here's the truth. A real joke makes people laugh, not bleed. Humor isn't supposed to humiliate. And anyone who repeatedly says, "I was just joking," after saying something that hurt you, isn't being funny. They're being strategic. They're pushing boundaries to see how far they can go. And if you let it slide once, they'll do it again. Because to them, your silence is permission. This is where Stoic wisdom slices through the fog. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The tongue often reveals what the heart dares not admit." That's exactly what this phrase does. It lets people say what they really think under the safe cover of humor. The insult wasn't an accident. It was intentional. The joke was the disguise. And if they can say it with a smile and get away with it, they'll never have to own the intent behind it. Let me tell you about a woman I know. Let's call her Sarah. She was dating a guy who constantly made jokes at her expense. At first, it was small stuff, teasing her in front of friends, making sarcastic comments about her job. Then, it became personal. He'd make jokes about her weight, her family, even her past. Every time she spoke up, he'd laugh and say, "Come on, don't be so uptight, I'm just kidding." But Sarah wasn't laughing. Deep down, she knew those words weren't jokes. They were messages. And eventually, she stopped reacting. That's when he escalated, because he thought he had permission. It wasn't until a friend pointed it out that Sarah realized he wasn't being funny. He was being cruel and getting away with it. So how do you handle it? First, listen to the feeling behind the joke. If it hurts, it matters. Second, call it out. Say, "If it's a joke, why am I the only one not laughing?" And most importantly, watch the pattern. If someone repeatedly hides behind humor to disrespect you, they're not joking. They're testing your boundaries. Because at the end of the day, anyone who values you will laugh with you, not at you. And anyone who tells you to relax after causing pain isn't funny. They're just hoping you won't notice what they really meant. Number 4. After everything I've done for you. Let's talk about one of the most emotionally loaded phrases manipulators use. After everything I've done for you. On the surface, it sounds like a plea for appreciation, but listen closely and you'll hear something more insidious beneath it. Emotional blackmail. This phrase isn't about gratitude, it's about guilt. It's not about connection, it's about control. What they're really saying is, "You owe me, so don't you dare resist me now." Here's how it works. They do something for you, sometimes generously, sometimes casually. And instead of letting that good deed stand as an act of kindness, they put it on a mental scoreboard, not to celebrate the relationship, but to hold it over your head. So the moment you set a boundary, express a need, or say no, they reach for it. After everything I've done for you, suddenly your discomfort isn't valid. Your boundary isn't fair, because now you're ungrateful. Now you're the problem. But here's the truth. Love and support, when genuine, don't come with strings attached. Real kindness doesn't require payback. And anyone who keeps a running tab on their generosity isn't being generous. They're building leverage. This is where Stoic clarity shines through. Seneca once wrote, "He who gives with a ledger never truly gave." That means any act of giving that expects a return isn't kindness. It's investment with emotional interest. And manipulators cash that in whenever your autonomy threatens their control. Let me tell you about someone I know. Let's call her Megan. When Megan finally started therapy and began setting healthy boundaries, her older sister, who had helped her through college years earlier, wasn't happy. Every time Megan tried to create space, her sister snapped back with, After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. It didn't matter that Megan wasn't being disrespectful. She was simply growing. But her sister wasn't interested in that. She was interested in control. And using past support as a weapon was her way of maintaining it. Eventually, Megan realized that her sister's help wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in control. And once Megan stopped reacting to guilt and started standing in truth, everything changed. She didn't reject her sister. She just stopped playing the game. And slowly, the guilt stopped working. So what do you do when someone throws this phrase at you? First, pause. Don't get sucked into the guilt spiral. Second, ask yourself, was their help truly unconditional, or was it an invisible contract? And third, hold your boundary. You are not a debt to be collected, because in the end, someone who weaponizes what they've done for you isn't honoring the bond, they're leveraging it. And true love, true friendship, and true respect, they don't keep score, they give and let go. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a thank God and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 5. If you really loved me, you'd... Let's talk about one of the most manipulative weapons disguised as affection. If you really loved me, you'd... On the surface, it sounds like vulnerability, like someone is expressing their emotional need. But look closer, and you'll see it for what it truly is. Emotional coercion wrapped in sentiment. This isn't love, it's leverage. This phrase isn't asking for connection. It's demanding compliance. It doesn't leave room for conversation, only for surrender. Here's what's really happening. The phrase sets a trap. It frames love as a condition, a test you must pass to prove your loyalty. Suddenly, your freedom becomes a threat to them. Your boundaries, your hesitation, your perspective, none of that matters anymore. All that matters is whether you'll comply. And if you don't, the implication is that you don't really love them. You fail the test. And that shame, that's what they're counting on. Because if they can make you feel guilty enough, you'll fold. But love, real love, doesn't come with ultimatums. It doesn't need you to prove yourself again and again just to be worthy. True love is a space, not a test. It respects your choices, your time, your boundaries. It doesn't hold your affection hostage. This is where Stoic wisdom offers clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is taken through fear is never given from the soul." Think about that. If someone pressures you into doing something under the threat of emotional withdrawal, what you give them isn't love. It's fear wearing a mask. They haven't earned your trust. They've manipulated your guilt. Let me tell you about a man I know. Let's call him Daniel. He was in a relationship where his partner constantly used this line. "If you really loved me, you'd cancel your plans. If you really loved me, you'd tell your friends we can't go. If you really loved me, you'd prove it." At first, Daniel complied. He wanted to make things work, but over time, he noticed something. No matter what he gave up, the bar kept moving. The more he gave, the more was demanded. And each time he hesitated, she used that phrase like a dagger. Until one day, Daniel realized this wasn't love. It was control disguised as devotion. Her love wasn't freely offered. It was negotiated through emotional ransom. So how do you respond when someone says this? First, pause. Ask yourself, is this request coming from love or from fear? Second, flip the lens. Say, if you loved me, you wouldn't need to test it. And third, remember, your boundaries are not a sign of disloyalty. They're a reflection of self-respect. Because at the end of the day, anyone who truly loves you will never ask you to prove it by betraying yourself. Love that demands evidence isn't love, it's control, and the soul knows the difference. You don't have to perform your love to be worthy of it. Real love recognizes freedom, not fear, as its foundation. Number 6. Fine, do whatever you want. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive phrases in manipulation. Fine, do whatever you want. At first glance, it sounds like permission, but anyone who's ever heard it in the heat of tension knows it's not freedom, it's punishment. It's not about letting you choose, it's about making you feel bad for choosing. That phrase is soaked in bitterness, designed to create guilt without ever saying so out loud. It's emotional withdrawal dressed as maturity. This is how passive aggression works. Instead of expressing frustration openly, they withdraw affection. Instead of saying how they feel, they deliver silence that stings. They don't want to solve the issue, they want to make you uncomfortable enough to come crawling back. It's the psychological equivalent of slamming the door quietly and then waiting to see if you'll notice the cold air. Here's the real danger. You're not fighting over an issue anymore. You're fighting for clarity. You start questioning yourself. Did I really do something wrong? Am I selfish for wanting what I want? And just like that, the original problem fades into the background. Now, the only thing that matters is fixing their mood, restoring harmony that they quietly broke. But here's the truth. Communication that forces guilt instead of offering truth is not love, it's control. And control wrapped in silence is still control. Epictetus once said, "Say what you mean what you say." That's not just Stoic advice, it's emotional clarity. Relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, require honesty. And fine, do whatever you want is not honest. It's a trap. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call him Daniel. Daniel was in a friendship where every time he made a decision the other person didn't like, whether it was choosing to hang out with someone else, turning down a favor, or even disagreeing, the same phrase would show up. Fine, do whatever you want. But it never felt fine, and he never really felt free. Daniel would end up over-explaining, apologizing for boundaries that weren't wrong, and tiptoeing through decisions just to avoid the cold shoulder. It took him a long time to realize he wasn't being given freedom. He was being emotionally manipulated into feeling like he'd done something wrong every time he exercised it. So what do you do when someone pulls this passive-aggressive trick? First, resist the urge to fix the mood they won't explain. That's not your job. Second, respond with directness. If something's bothering you, say it plainly. I don't respond to silence. And third, protect your clarity. Emotional honesty is a two-way street. You deserve relationships where guilt isn't the currency, because in the end, silence that's meant to confuse is still a form of control. And you weren't meant to live in a fog of uncertainty just to keep someone else comfortable. You were meant to breathe, speak, and choose clearly. Number 7. I guess I'm always the bad guy. Let's talk about one of the most manipulative phrases people use when they're cornered. I guess I'm always the bad guy. At first, it sounds like surrender, like someone finally admitting fault. But don't be fooled. This phrase isn't an apology. It's an escape route. It flips the script. Suddenly, your hurt becomes an attack, and they become the misunderstood victim. You came to talk about something that hurt you, and now you're the one who's done the hurting. And just like that, the conversation derails. Your pain disappears under the weight of their performance. Here's what's really happening. They're not acknowledging what they did. They're making you feel guilty for bringing it up. It's emotional bait. They want you to backpedal, to say, "No, that's not what I meant," or "You're not the bad guy," just to soothe their ego. And once you do, they've succeeded. Not only did they avoid accountability, but they also managed to make you responsible for their feelings too. Now you're defending them instead of holding them accountable. Here's the truth. Someone who genuinely cares about how their actions affected you won't hijack the conversation with theatrics. They'll listen, reflect, take responsibility. But someone who says, "I guess I'm always the bad guy," they're not engaging in growth, they're performing guilt, and Stoic wisdom sees through it clearly. As Nietzsche wrote, "The guilty confess through performance." In other words, when someone uses exaggerated victimhood as a shield, they're not confessing, they're avoiding. They know they did something wrong. They just don't want to deal with it directly. So they perform just enough guilt to silence the confrontation. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Ben, had a longtime friend named Chris. Over time, Chris started crossing boundaries, borrowing things without asking, making snide remarks in front of others, always brushing off Ben's concerns. One day, Ben finally sat down and told Chris how these things were affecting him. Chris didn't apologize. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he sighed and said, "I guess I'm just the bad guy, huh?" That one line changed the entire conversation. Ben found himself trying to comfort Chris, saying, "No, man, I didn't mean it like that." And just like that, the original issue vanished. No accountability, just deflection. So how do you handle it? First, recognize the tactic. That line isn't about resolution, it's about reversal. Second, stay grounded. You brought up a valid concern. Don't let emotional bait pull you off course. And finally, redirect the focus. Say something like, "This isn't about who's the bad guy, it's about what happened." Keep the spotlight where it belongs, on the behavior, not the performance. Because at the end of the day, people who value you will take responsibility without needing to make themselves the victim first. And anyone who hides behind guilt instead of growing from it, they're not being honest, they're just playing a part. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.